Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
This time we're taking a look at Baltimore's affordable housing scene.
Right.
We've been wading through reports, plans, you name it, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But we're going to be focusing on the plans themselves and how they connect to the work of one particular organization, the historic East Baltimore Community Action Coalition.
PAPCAC.
HEPCAC, exactly.
It's a mouthful.
It is, and these government documents can be a bit much sometimes.
Oh, yeah, they're dense.
But we've weeded through all the jargon, all the numbers, and pulled out the really important stuff for you.
Absolutely, we've got the good stuff here.
So to kick things off, we've been looking at the 2020 to 2025 Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan.
Yeah, that's kind of the Bible when it comes to housing in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's
There's like the city's master plan for tackling all these housing challenges, right?
It is. It's where they lay out how they're going to use federal funding to actually make a difference in people's lives.
So it's not just some dusty document sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah. Nope. This is about real action.
That's what we like to hear.
Real impact.
Exactly. And speaking of real action, I was pretty surprised to learn just how much public and assisted housing Baltimore already has.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot more than people realize.
Right, we're talking something like 30,000 rental units with subsidies,
Wow.
plus almost 13,000 households using those housing choice vouchers.
That's a pretty big commitment to affordable housing.
Yeah, it really shows you the scale of the need here. But it also got me thinking about how they're actually deciding where to focus all these resources.
Well, that's where the data comes in.
Okay, tell me more.
They've developed this really interesting tool called the housing market typology.
Housing market, what now?
Typology.
Typology. Okay, break that down for me and for our listeners who might not be familiar with all the housing lingo.
Sure. So basically, think of it like a map of Baltimore's housing market.
Okay.
They've broken down all the different neighborhoods into categories based on, things like vacancy rates, property values, whether people are renting or owning their homes.
So it's like a way to get a really granular picture of what's happening in different parts of the city.
Exactly. And it helps them identify what they call middle market neighborhoods.
Middle market. That sounds interesting. What's
Yeah.
that all about?
These are neighborhoods that are relatively stable but could really benefit from some targeted investments.
Okay, so not areas that are already super gentrified
Right.
or areas that are really struggling, kind of that sweet spot in between.
Exactly. The idea is that if they make strategic investments in these areas, they can help preserve affordability and attract new residents.
So prevent those neighborhoods from tipping too far in one direction or the other.
Exactly. It's a proactive approach.
I like it. So it's like a tool to help them prioritize where to focus their energy and resources.
Precisely.
Makes sense. So speaking of focus, the plan is very clear about what Baltimore sees as its top housing needs.
It lays out a pretty clear vision.
One thing that jumped out at me was this idea of building from strength.
Oh, that's a fascinating approach.
Yeah, what's that all about?
So instead of just trying to fix everything at once, they're focusing on neighborhoods that are already doing relatively well,
Okay.
using them as kind of anchors for broader community development.
So it's like they're building on a solid foundation.
Exactly. The idea is that by investing in these stronger areas, they can create ripple effects that benefit the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, so instead of spreading their resources thin, they're making more concentrated investments where they can have the most impact.
It's all about maximizing the impact.
Smart. And are these anchor neighborhoods what they're calling the impact investment areas in the plan?
Yes, exactly. They've identified 4 impact investment areas:
Which are?
East Baltimore, Park Heights, Southwest Baltimore, and West Baltimore.
Got it. So each area has its own unique challenges and opportunities.
Definitely. But they also share some common themes like public safety concerns, poverty, lack of access to jobs and transportation.
Those are some big issues.
They are, but the plan takes a really holistic approach. It's not just about building houses, it's about addressing all these underlying factors that contribute to housing instability.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm really curious to see how this plays out in a specific area.
You too?
Can we zoom in on East Baltimore, since that's where HEPEG is doing most of its work?
Definitely. East Baltimore is a really interesting case study.
What makes it so interesting?
Well, it's an area that's seen a lot of change in recent years.
Okay.
Some parts have experienced significant revitalization, with new housing and businesses,
Right.
but other parts are still struggling with poverty and disinvestment.
That's a really mixed bag.
It is. It's a microcosm of the city as a whole. And then you've got this massive redevelopment project called the East Baltimore Development Initiative.
That sounds familiar.
They call it EBDI for short.
UBDI, got it.
It's brought over 2,000 new housing units to the area,
Wow, 2,000.
plus a ton of research space for life sciences.
So it's a major investment.
Huge. And it's definitely changing the landscape of the neighborhood.
Yeah, but I'm also curious about those smaller community-driven projects we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
What's happening on that front in East Baltimore?
Well, there's the revitalized Henrietta Lacks Park.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
It's a great example of how they're using public space to create a sense of community.
Right.
Then you've got some really cool adaptive reuse projects.
Like what?
They've transformed this historic building called the Hohen Lithograph Building into apartments and shops.
Wow, that's awesome. I love those kinds of projects, bringing new life to these old buildings.
Me too. It's much better than just tearing them down.
Exactly. And there's new construction happening, too.
Yeah, especially in the Coldstream Homestead Montebello neighborhood.
Okay, and what about that Last Mile Park project I read about?
Oh, that one's really innovative.
Tell me more.
They're actually turning a pretty scary rail underpass into a welcoming community space.
Whoa, how are they doing that?
They're adding art lighting green spaces.
Wow, so it's going from like a dark, neglected space to something vibrant and inviting.
Exactly. It's a great example of how they're thinking outside the box.
I love it. Okay, but let's get back to ABC CAC.
Sure.
They're playing a pretty big role in all of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're one of the key players in East Baltimore.
What kind of work are they doing?
They offer a whole range of services, from housing assistance to job training to youth programs.
Okay, so they're really trying to address those underlying issues we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They're taking a holistic approach.
I'm impressed.
Ugh.
So one of the things that really stood out to me was their 10-bed emergency shelter for homeless youth.
Oh, yeah? That's a vital resource.
Imagine being 18, 24 years old and having nowhere to go.
It's heartbreaking.
This shelter provides such a critical safety net for young people in crisis.
It does. It gives them a safe haven and the support they need to get back on their feet.
Absolutely. But how does EBCCAC fit into this larger picture of the city's housing plans?
Well, that's where the Consolidated Plan comes back in. They actually secured funding for that shelter through the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, which is part of the broader Consolidated Plan.
Oh, so it's all connected.
It is. It all comes back to that master plan.
So the city's plan lays out the framework, and organizations like HEBSAC are stepping up to fill in the details and make things happen on the ground.
Exactly. It's a partnership.
This is really starting to come together for me.
Me too.
And hopefully for our listeners as well.
I hope so.
It's amazing to see how these plans aren't just theoretical documents.
Right.
They're actually translating into tangible support for organizations that are doing such important work in the community.
Absolutely. It's all about making a real difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really inspiring.
It is, and it highlights how these plans aren't just theoretical documents. They're actually translating into tangible support for organizations that are doing such vital work in the community.
Exactly. It's all about making a real difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. But speaking of challenges, there's another issue that the plan really tackles head on.
Oh, yeah.
Vacant buildings.
Vacant buildings a huge problem in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean,
Yeah.
just imagine walking down a street where every other house is boarded up, abandoned.
It's a blight on the landscape.
Right. And according to the plan, as of August 2020, there were over 15,900 vacant buildings with notices issued.
Wow. That's a staggering number.
It is. And, these empty buildings, they don't just sit there empty. They actually contribute to all sorts of other problems.
Oh, absolutely. They drag down property values. They can become havens for crime.
Right.
They create this sense of neglect that can be really hard to overcome.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. One vacant building can really bring down an entire block.
So what's the plan's approach to tackling this issue?
Well, they acknowledge that demolition is necessary in some cases.
Right. Sometimes those buildings are just beyond repair.
Exactly. But they also emphasize the importance of rehabilitation whenever possible.
Okay, so it's not just a bulldoze everything approach.
No, it's much more nuanced than that.
They're trying to find that balance between removing blight
Right.
and preserving existing housing stock.
Exactly.
So how do they decide which buildings are worth saving?
They have specific criteria. They look at things like the cost of repairs, the potential market value after rehab,
Okay.
and even broader community development goals.
So give me an example. How do those community goals factor into the decision?
Let's say you have a row of houses and one is in really bad shape.
Okay.
Rehabilitating that one house, even if it's expensive, might be justified if it helps stabilize the entire block.
Right.
and encourages further investment down the line.
So it's about thinking strategically, looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But obviously, rehabilitation takes money, and we know Baltimore's faced some budget challenges.
Yeah, funding is always an issue.
So how does the plan propose to tackle this?
Well, the plan gets into the nitty-gritty of the financial resources available.
Okay.
It breaks down all the different funding sources, federal grants, state and local funds, even private investments.
So they're really looking at every possible avenue.
They have to. It's a massive undertaking.
And do they give any specific examples of how this funding is being used?
They do. For example, in the first year of the plan, they expected to have over $23 million in CDBG funds for various activities, including housing rehabilitation.
Wow, $23 million. That's a significant chunk of change.
It is. It shows they're serious about putting their money where their mouth is.
Right. But how do we know if this plan is actually working?
That's the key question, isn't
Are
it?
they just throwing money at the problem? Or are they actually tracking progress and making adjustments along the way?
Well, the plan has a whole section on monitoring and evaluation.
Okay, so they're not just setting these goals and then forgetting about them?
No, they're actually using data to track their progress.
What kind of data are they looking at?
They're using a variety of metrics to measure their progress towards those goals we talked about earlier.
Okay.
It's not just about counting how many affordable units are created. They're also looking at things like the number of people receiving housing assistance, changes in crime rates, even shifts in property values.
So it's a data-driven approach.
Absolutely. They're using hard numbers to measure the real-world impact of these investments.
That's reassuring to hear.
They're not just hoping for the best. They're actively monitoring the situation and using data to inform their decisions.
So they're being accountable.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the challenges, we've got the strategies, we've got the funding, we've got the monitoring all laid out in this plan.
It's a pretty comprehensive document.
It is,
Yeah.
but there's one piece that I'm still kind of curious about.
What's that?
Citizen participation. The plan mentions it several times.
Right.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It's a crucial aspect of the plan.
Okay.
It's not a top-down approach at all. The city recognizes that community involvement is key to creating solutions that actually work for the people who live there.
So they're not just imposing these plans on communities.
No, they're actively seeking input from residents.
How do they do that?
They hold public hearings, they conduct surveys, they work with community-based organizations like HBSAC to gather feedback.
So they're making a real effort to listen to the community.
Absolutely. They want to make sure that the people who are most affected by these housing issues have a voice in the process.
That's encouraging to hear.
It is. Of course, it's always a challenge to make sure that all voices are heard.
Right.
But the plan really emphasizes the importance of a collaborative approach.
It's about empowering communities to be part of the solution, not just passive recipients of it.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to HBSAC.
Full circle.
They're not just providing services, they're advocating for the needs of their community and making sure those needs are reflected in the city's plans.
They're a powerful voice for the community.
Absolutely. So I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Oh, yeah.
One of the big takeaways from this deep dive is the importance of collaboration and community engagement.
It's essential.
When it comes to tackling these really complex issues like affordable housing,
It can't be done in a vacuum.
right, it's not just about the government throwing money at the problem. It's about working together to find solutions that are both sustainable and equitable.
It's about building a better future for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that this collaborative approach, it's not just a nice idea.
Right.
It's woven into the very fabric of the plan.
It's a fundamental principle that guides their strategies and actions.
It makes you wonder, what if every city adopted a similar approach?
That's a great question.
What if we always put community needs at the forefront of our planning and decision-making?
It's a model worth exploring.
Absolutely. But for now, let's shift our focus to another critical piece of Baltimore's housing landscape,
Okay.
lead paint.
That paint a serious health hazard.
It is, especially for young children.
It can lead to all sorts of developmental problems.
Right, learning disabilities, behavioral issues. It's scary stuff.
It's a legacy of older housing stock, and unfortunately, it disproportionately affects low-income communities.
Yeah, it's a real problem. But the good news is the plan acknowledges this and outlines specific strategies for addressing it.
Oh, yeah, they're not shying away from this issue.
What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, they've got lead hazard inspections, abatement programs, even relocation assistance for families living in lead-contaminated homes.
So they're not just trying to create affordable housing. They're aiming for safe and healthy housing.
It's a holistic approach.
I like that. And this connects to that concept of healthy homes that's woven throughout the plan.
Right. It's not just about putting a roof over someone's head. It's about creating living environments that support well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of that Green and Healthy Homes initiative that we saw in the plan's project summaries.
Oh, yeah. They're doing great work.
They're making homes healthier and more energy efficient for low-income families.
It's a win-win.
It is. But I'm curious about the funding for lead abatement. Where's that money coming from?
Well, the plan outlines various funding sources for lead hazard reduction.
Like,
CDBG funds specific federal programs for lead abatement, even state and local funds.
so they're pulling resources from multiple avenues.
Exactly. They recognize that lead paint isn't just a housing problem, it's a public health crisis.
It really is. So it sounds like they're taking a multi-pronged approach to this as well.
Absolutely. It reinforces that holistic approach to community development.
Right. It's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about creating healthy and sustainable communities where people can thrive.
That's the ultimate goal.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about the plan's overarching vision, the nuts and bolts of specific programs, the crucial role of organizations like AGBCAC.
Yeah, we've really gotten into the weeds.
We have, but I think it's been worthwhile. I feel like we're getting a good grasp on how Baltimore is approaching these affordable housing challenges.
Me too. It's been an eye-opening conversation.
So what stands out to you as the most important takeaway from this deep dive so far?
That's a tough one. There's so much to unpack.
I know, right? But if you had to pick one thing.
I think for me, it's the emphasis on collaboration and community engagement.
Yeah, that's really resonating with me too.
The plan recognizes that these are multifaceted issues that require a multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely.
It's not just about government intervention. It's about working with community organizations, residents, even private investors to find solutions that are both sustainable and equitable.
And it's about recognizing that these are complex problems that don't have easy solutions.
Right, there's no magic bullet.
But by working together, we can make progress.
I agree. And I think we're seeing that in Baltimore.
We are. And we can't forget about the importance of data and monitoring.
Oh, that's crucial.
The plan outlines specific metrics to track progress and make sure that these investments are actually making a real difference.
It's about accountability and transparency.
Exactly. Making sure that these plans translate into tangible improvements in people's lives.
We need to see results, not just good intentions.
Absolutely. Well, I'm feeling pretty inspired by all this. It's a reminder that even these really complex problems like affordable housing, they can be tackled.
We can make a difference.
But it takes a commitment to collaboration, innovation, and a data-driven approach.
It's about working smarter, not just harder.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah,
And it really highlights the power of community-level change.
it does. Grassroots movements can make a real difference.
So what do we do with all this newfound knowledge?
That's the million-dollar question.
What's the next step?
Well, I think the answer lies in continuing to explore and learn.
Okay.
The plan provides a roadmap, but it's up to us to engage with it, ask critical questions, and advocate for the changes we want to see in our communities.
We can't just sit back and expect things to happen.
Right. We need to be active participants in shaping our future.
I'm definitely ready to keep digging.
Me too. But
Yeah.
for now,
Yeah.
I think we've given our listeners plenty to process.
We have a lot to think about.
Shall we wrap up this part of our deep dive and pick up the conversation next time?
Sounds good to me. Until then.
Keep those brains buzzing, fellow deep divers.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Baltimore's affordable housing plans. And, we've talked about a lot of the challenges facing the city, but I think it's important to remember that Baltimore also has a lot going for it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a city with so much potential.
Right. It's got this rich history,
Yeah,
amazing cultural institutions, and a really strong sense of community.
definitely. And the plan actually acknowledges that.
Oh, yeah.
It emphasizes the importance of building on those strengths, leveraging existing assets and partnerships to really drive community development.
So it's like they're saying, let's work with what we've got and make it even better.
Exactly. It's about building on that solid foundation instead of trying to start from scratch.
I like that approach.
Uh-huh.
And that includes, tapping into the expertise and the passion of all those community-based organizations we've been talking about.
Oh, for sure. We focused a lot on ADB CAC.
Right.
But there are so many other incredible groups doing amazing work in Baltimore.
Totally. Throughout the plan, they highlight all these organizations tackling everything from job training to youth development to public safety to environmental sustainability.
It's really inspiring.
It is. It shows you how much people care about their city.
It does, and it underscores the fact that community development is this really multifaceted endeavor.
Right.
It's not just about housing. It's about creating this thriving ecosystem where people can live and work and play.
It's about creating opportunities for everyone,
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about creating a city where everyone has the chance to succeed.
regardless of their background or their zip code.
Absolutely. That's what makes this whole conversation so important.
It's about equity opportunity, a city that works for everyone.
Ambitious goals, for sure.
They are, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and collaboration and probably some tough choices along the way to get there.
Oh, yeah. There will be bumps in the road, for sure.
But what matters is that the city is moving forward with a clear vision, a data-driven approach, and that genuine commitment to community engagement.
I think that's the key takeaway here.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Baltimore's affordable housing plans, let's leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Oh, okay, I like it.
We've seen how the city is using data to track progress and measure impact,
Right?
but what about the human stories behind those numbers?
Ah, that's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in all the statistics and the policy details.
Right, but we can't forget that this is about people's lives.
Exactly.
So what are their hopes, their dreams, their
Mhm.
challenges? How are these plans actually impacting their day-to-day experiences?
Those are the stories we need to hear.
They are. So we encourage you, our listeners, to go beyond the numbers and explore those stories.
Talk to your neighbors, connect with community organizations, learn about the lived experiences of the people who are most affected by these housing challenges.
Because understanding those stories is essential to creating a city that truly works for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And of course, be sure to check out our show notes for links to the Consolidated Plan and more information about EBCAC and all those other amazing organizations working in Baltimore.
Keep the conversation going online using our episode hashtag.
We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this deep dive.
So until next time, keep exploring
Keep learning.
and keep diving deep.